welcome everybody. Can't believe it's week 3 of our ABODE Academy this time, and you're in for a real treat tonight. Tonight we're going to start our kind of our preparation, or finish our preparation for death and getting ready for what's coming. And tonight we're going to be just again in for such a great treat. We have 2 speakers tonight, and they're going to change up our format a little bit, so I think you'll enjoy that. We've got Arthur Dawes, who's a former social worker, naturalist, ABODE volunteer, and coordinator for Pax Christi, a social justice advocacy group. And then we have Darwin Huartson, and Darwin is a community coordinator for Porter Loring Mortuaries. And tonight, our topic is called A Good Death Is Your Life in Order. So hopefully they're going to get us organized and kind of tell us about things that we may not think of.
What are you building? Are
for what's happening. So just as in our previous sessions, we'll all be muted, and if you have a question, put it in the chat box and we'll go over questions at the end. And I guess that's it. I'll introduce our next topic at the end of tonight's session, and just remember there will be a survey that'll come out in email tomorrow, and please fill that out. So just look for that and get it in and get it back to us so we can start preparing for our next ABODE Academy, which will be ABODE Academy 3. So what we'll do, just like we love to do here at ABODE, is start our evening off with a contemplative moment. And so Mary, if you'll get started with that, and we'll start our session.
Okay, thank you. We're just going to take a moment to meditate, and this meditation is for gratitude. So begin in a comfortable seated position with your feet grounded, and that you feel grounded through your seat. And when you're settled, close your eyes. Start to pay attention to your breath by taking mindful breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Breathe in for the count of 4 and breathe out for the count of 4. Start to think about how lucky we are. What are you grateful for? Take a moment to think in your mind of at least 3 things that you're grateful for. And as you inhale, send extra gratitude to these 3 things that you're grateful for. If your mind starts to wander, simply be an observer of your thoughts, but don't judge them. Bring your attention back to your breath and the things that you're thankful for. Keep breathing. All you need to do right now is breathe and drench yourself in gratitude. And notice how practicing mindfulness and gratitude can help you feel happier. Open your eyes and recognize the gratitude that we all share for this special time together. And that's it.
Okay, Arthur and Darwin, are you ready?
Yes.
We're ready.
Yes.
Okay.
It is so good to be with you tonight, and something I'm grateful for is being here tonight. I'm grateful for knowing some of you on this screen and eager to know more of you. one of the things about this topic tonight, when Mary asked Arthur and I to do it, I said, end of life care. I've been doing that for a long time. And then I started thinking about the fact that I was going to be doing this with Arthur. And I want to just tell you a little bit about Arthur from my perspective. Like I said, we worked in end of life care. He and I worked for a hospice, a large hospice. And I observed him in that role as a social worker. But I also observed him as a person who was very focused on listening to stories and also telling stories. And then after we both left that hospice, we stayed connected. And then we started in a meditation group. And I again saw this pattern that not only was he an expert at storytelling and end-of-life care, but he had become a master of wanting people to understand how important it is to be able to tell your story. And so as we started looking at this topic tonight, I said, Arthur, you have so much to share. And so I asked him if he would be willing to look at this from his perspective. And what he actually came up with was really saying, well, why don't I kind of tell my story? And as a result, I thought, yeah, as a result, maybe we'll all catch the bug and we'll be willing to do our story. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Arthur and my colleague and my friend and good storyteller. Arthur?
Thank you. Thank you, Darwin. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the ABODE Academy. This evening, we will look at pictures as we share information and share stories. And so if we could have the first slide come up, please. Okay. This is a picture of nature and a picture of giving. May it symbolize all of us and all our journeys and abode. The next slide. This is a picture of the blue hole at the Incarnate Word, at the headwaters, the preserve. And this is also the beginning, the source, the well of the San Antonio River. It's open to the public for everyone to visit and meditate. Welcome you to go there. It's like Abode, like the beginning of Abode, which you will see in a minute. Okay, next slide. Oh, that was the picture of Edwin and Darwin and myself at ABODE. You can see we're meditating with someone there. And we're meditating on a weekly basis. And when the weather permits, we go to that location at ABODE and have coffee with Jesus. Okay, the next slide. Okay, this is a picture of Abode, actually. Believe it or not, this is a picture of what it looked like in the very beginning. This evening, you're invited to travel with Darwin and myself to organize your information, to begin or continue to write your story, engage in a dialogue. This is an invitation to organize our information, write our story, and engage in a dialogue. When I was at Vitas Hospice, there was a social worker by the name of Lucy Haig who was known for saying that we see families through a small window. Tonight, this is a gift to Abode and to all of you and to all of us. We are all a gift. This is a process that began many years ago, and you're asked to contribute and to participate as you see these pictures and maybe see something of yourself. Next picture. Okay. This is a journey about our experience in organizing our information, about sharing, about reviewing, about community, about being vulnerable and is mysterious. It is about feelings and perspectives. It's about abundance and appreciating. It can be as simple as listing information from my advocate, or it could also be a book with stories and pictures. It is a journey of feelings, which are a major part of reviewing and deciding what is important. For many, there is an experience of hesitation, of procrastination, possibly issues of privacy, and possibly having experienced things that we just as soon forget. Feelings are our anchor. ABODE, contemplative care for the dying, is an experience of community, of contemplation, living and exploring and of reflecting on our lives. In the spirit of contemplation and reflection, we will travel in stories about the end of life journey. This journey can be as private or as shared as one chooses, personal, so to speak. It can be very serious, as information is listed for my advocate, and it can be fun, depending on how I write my story. A friend and mentor, Sister Alice Holden, reminds me, if it isn't fun, it shouldn't be done. The next, let's stay with this one. The Shack is a novel written several years ago, a story about a man whose young daughter had been kidnapped during a camping trip in Oregon. After years of searching, a note was left in his mailbox to go to a location in the mountains. There, at the top of the mountain, he encountered in a shack the Trinity. God the Father was a large Black woman. God the Son was a middle-aged man, and the Spirit was flying about freely. One day, the Spirit asked the father of the child if he wanted to go on a journey, and he said yes. They went to a garden, and the father of the child said that his garden looked like a mess, to which the Spirit responded that it was his soul. This is a meditation to explore my garden, my story. This is a journey of organizing, might be related to planning a garden, checking the plants, cultivating the garden, just like what you saw in ABODE a minute ago with the shack and the debris. The picture of a shack you see is of the property purchased by ABODE. There was junk, boards, trees, and weeds. On a cool, sunny Saturday morning, Edwin and Patsy, Liz and Craig, and myself and many others cleaned the lot. Seems like yesterday. Memory bears. 15 years as a medical social worker in hospice services included the serious responsibility of addressing end-of-life decisions. Addressing advance directives were a major responsibility and a challenge at times, and required by Medicare. Included were decisions about choosing not to be resuscitated if one is unable to respond, choosing an advocate to represent me if I'm unable to respond, and choosing to not be kept alive by artificial life support. These are very serious decisions, and many times were considered for the first time in the life of the dying person and the family. Trust is everything in this scenario. However, there was a moment of humanity and relief when memory bears were addressed. Family members were asked if they would want a bear made from clothing or a blanket of their loved one. Volunteer seamstresses would then make a bear of the cloth, and it would be returned to the family within 2 weeks. It was endearing and a privilege to see the bears embraced by family members and loved ones. On one occasion when I was visiting a mother and her daughter, the mother had been a seamstress and the daughter was sitting next to her on the couch. And I thought that the lady had fallen asleep. And I was telling the daughter about the bears, and the lady said, "I want to make some too." I was very touched by that. Many of us have memories from loved ones. I have a bear from my godfather, a Smokey the Bear, and it was given to me when I was 8 years old. And I have a carved wooden Indian from the fireplace mantle of my grandmother. I have a dear friend who, when she was young, read National Geographics and never thought she would visit the national parks. However, we did go to Yosemite, Zion, the Grand Canyon, and others. To this day, Gloria has photographed books and stories from each visit and relives them many years later to this day. She has a great way of revisiting and sharing. The next slide, please. Okay. Sometimes we have things in our life that we'd rather think about, and sometimes there's things we'd rather not. And that's what trash cans are for. Thank you. Next slide. Give some thought to this statement by the great psychiatrist Carl Jung. The first half of life is about accumulating, and the second half is about letting go. Next slide. Okay. What I include in my story or leave out is my choice. I can pack or trash. I can throw a party my way and invite who I choose. I can share and exercise discretion with myself and others. I will ask you to contemplate, listen, and share as you choose. Now I would like to share my passion as related to abode and ethics. My background has allowed a firsthand experience with persons who are dying. Experiencing firsthand the passion and skills of doctors and nurses who are expert at comforting a dying person was very rewarding. Several training sessions addressed ethics education, decision-making, which focused on respect for each person and the use of resources. Several colleagues also involved in abode helped to create a scenario to experientially address decisions about life support. Mrs. J was an elderly lady whose husband was a Catholic and she was not. She had no advance directive except for her medical power of attorney, her nephew. When she got sick, he placed her in a nursing home because she needed care. He wanted to take care of her. Well, he died and she became worse and was placed on life support, and she was unable to respond. Her nephew had been appointed to be her medical power of attorney, and he was afraid to authorize a disconnection of life support, and the Catholic nursing home staff was not willing to allow for life support to be disconnected. Edwin, Elizabeth Newhouse, Patrice Williams joined in writing scripts for the doctor, the nurse, the family members, and the nursing home staff, and the hospice staff to use as a starting point and interact spontaneously. This was experiential and touched participants as all struggled with the decision to let go. This education piece involved many from Abode and the greater community and touched us deeply. There was a social worker who was affiliated with Abode who attended this workshop, and her husband was in a severe medical crisis. And because of what she learned in this workshop, she was able to call for an ethics consult and saved her husband significant distress. Other trainings involved the Abode community, included a workshop on Dorothy Day. Oh, we could go back to Dorothy Day, please. There, okay, thank you. An American woman who experienced a very strong call to serve the poor. A script was written in the first person, sharing Dorothy's own experience and many struggles. 3 women shared her life in a first person speech. One spoke about her early years, a second woman spoke about her middle years, and a third spoke about her final years. Our own Medea staff at Abode graciously agreed to read the script from the early years and did an excellent, passionate performance. Other workshops included a visit to the Holocaust Museum in San Antonio, where a survivor of the Holocaust shared her experience and gave each of us a big hug. For 5 years, the Lazarus community has visited monthly the Paupers Cemetery in Southwest Bexar County. It was 8 years prior that there had been a burial service. Impoverished residents of Bexar County are buried in a cardboard casket, 3 to a grave, and had no prior funeral service for 8 years. We continued to visit on the third Saturday of each month and have been joined many times by other members of the ABODE community. Chris Clichet, the director of Catholic Worker House, went with us one time, and she saw names of people on the graves who had been homeless and who had disappeared. And she went back and together with the other homeless had a memorial service for them.
Oh,
Pioneer Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. If we could go to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's slide. Yes, thank you. Many of you know about her. I'm told she was daring and revolutionary. She visited and learned from people who were dying. She has been said to be daring and revolutionary, and she identified 5 stages experienced by the dying. Many, many times I shared this information with family members, and it helped them understand experiences which they might not have understood as common to all of us. For many, the 5 stages are normal, a relief for both oneself and dear ones. These stages are also experienced throughout life as we meet and as we let go, as doors open and doors close. Many of life's transitions include dealing with losses. Throughout our lives, we have deaths and births. Even positive events are stressful and require extra care on our part. We can think of many times when we have had to adjust to giving up and letting go. School, a new job, marriage, divorce, moving to a new home, new family members, all are major transitions requiring care. Most of us have heard of the stages of loss of Dr. Ross: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. With all of these stages, we have feelings, which in many respects are an anchor in the sea of attachments and connections. Here we are talking about an inventory and a story. It has been said that this is about writing one's obituary. Some have written their own obituary and others let it be written for them. However, this is an opportunity to share my own thoughts and my stories. My passion is to celebrate while we are living, to nurture the garden in the present. For your use, a list will be provided. It is also at the ABODE webpage. Items and information from many sources are shared. And if you'd like to add something to it, feel free to. It's an open, fluid list. So how do I feel when I go through papers, clothes, furniture, mementos, treasures, vehicles, properties, savings? Who might want my belongings? Life is a series of stories from beginning to end. Oh, if we could have the next slide, please. And then the next one. There, okay. ABODE is a community of stories. Look at that. Stories are used to teach. At times, parables are used. Stories can be used for healing. Words can build and provide lessons. Words can also destroy. Life's transitions include dealing with gains as well as losses. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross addressed the emotional journey at the end of life, which in many ways is experienced throughout our lives as we journey. We could think of many times when we have had to adjust to giving up and letting go. Our culture gives us news stories and scriptures, creation stories, which begin with a word and is called good news. Both in Genesis and in the Gospel of John, creation comes about through a word that was spoken. Families and friends have stories and share many. Literature and folk stories are recalled from many places we have journeyed. In particular, I enjoy ghost stories from national parks. A friend's mother, Janetta Poston, wrote a book about their family. They are the Hertzberg family. And down on the corner of Houston and St. Mary's, there's a clock, a large green clock. And her mother actually put that clock up there and was responsible for that. Janetta Poston wrote a book about their family and had it bound and had stories about each member of their family. My cousin Joan, who writes family history Christmas cards every Christmas, has a friend who gave her a bound book of her husband's journey. She accepted it and learned years later that a granddaughter was very interested in her grandfather. My cousin took the young woman to lunch and gave her the book. Our country, our state, and our city, our communities have stories as to how they began and developed. History is said to be written by the winner. Today, and many are learning from history and are seeing lessons. ABODE has a story from the many documents and grant requests in the beginning when properties were inspected. At our present location, trees and brush and junk were cleared by many energetic and excited volunteers. We saw the home being built. We wrote prayers which are posted inside the walls to this day. The exciting dream of Edwin Sasek came true with the help of many people and their support as guests were embraced in their journey. Meditations continue to this day. For most of us, there have been saints and mentors we have encountered. For most of us, we are challenged by the need to forgive and let go. Remember discretion. Words can create and words can destroy. Trash cans can be useful for throwing away junk, as well as for memories and regrets. After all, what are trash cans for? Shall we say, be gentle? This was intended to be a reflection and meditative in this community of contemplative caregiving. It'll be followed by two lists. One is an inventory of information to be shared with an advocate, and the next list is personal preferences. You may have considered the organizing of your papers. Many people I know have done that, have organized their, or talked about organizing their papers, or you may have completed and delivered your information to the advocate. This list can be used as a guide. It can be compiled from several listings which are included at the ABODE website for anyone who wishes to use it. What to do with all the pictures, the documents, the albums, the china, the gifts we have been given, the belongings we have inherited. Many are simplifying their lives, and thrift stores have limited what they will take. Let's journey into what and who would appreciate our stories and our belongings as we set sail. You are invited to contribute to this journey and add to this list, which will be reviewed and updated every 6 months. Many of us have heard that a person is very fortunate if they have 5 good friends. I have 7 people with whom I have shared my story, and they have shared theirs. I also have 20 stories from my life, which are small stories, short stories, and humorous, and 20 from my career. The party, the celebration. Do we have another slide here? Okay, and this is the list of personal preferences. We can gather information for official use and be careful and selective about sharing. We can also write our experiences and be selective. You are encouraged to share with another person or persons and to celebrate your gifts and talents and encourage others to do so as well. Perhaps a trip to the party store or reviewing albums and photographs or making a book. You can display your photos, select songs, hymns, choose readings, choose that are dear to you. In gathering information, we are saving our advocates a journey of unraveling or second guessing. In completing our information clearly, we are increasing the chance of our choices being understood and respected. In writing our story, we're allowing others to see our journey as we see it and to serve as an encouragement or model to honor our community, to appreciate. In celebrating, we are honoring our lives and talents and our community. Our message to you today is about organizing, allowing ourselves to experience our thoughts and feelings. This is about an appreciation and organizing our lives with others. When communicating with others, it helps to know some of their journey and their passions. It is my hope that all of our talents are acknowledged and shared with one another, if possible, at times of celebrating and mourning. It is my hope that we acknowledge our own talents and those of others, for it is in giving that we receive. We might also look at the next step. I envision a workshop which takes place in a room with windows and music and refreshments. Remember, like Las Almas. Pictures of family and friends and mandalas could be compiled with stories to share about our life events. An artist could help with color and placement in a way to bring out the message of my experience and my hopes. Sharing our story can be healing and reinforcing of our strengths, of ourselves and others. So as we organize information for our advocates, we can also give attention to the many stories of our lives. A word of gratitude is due to Darwin, Mary, Beverly for their help in making this presentation possible. Thank you.
Arthur, thank you. Beverly had a couple of good questions, and I'd like to focus on those a little bit. And one of those is, how do we get started telling our story? And I think that's a really good question, because even those of us that know the power of it, sometimes have we taken the time to be intentional about it ourselves. And so what I'm hearing Arthur say, and Arthur, you might elaborate more on this if this isn't what you're saying, is I think what I'm hearing is that each of us have some important information to share with those that come after us. So how do we start sharing that information with them? You know, I'm a senior citizen, and I'm thinking, does my family know all the stuff that I want them to know? So I think, how do we get started? I think we get started by asking the question, what is it that we want people to know? And what is it that we want others to be able to take forward as part of our legacy? Arthur, do you have any suggestions if somebody came to you after tonight and said, how do I get started with this whole project? Because what you shared is a lot of information, a lot of good information. How do you break it down so that it's not so overwhelming?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is to take notes about what comes to your mind. I think that's always helpful. When we reach a certain age, we say, now what was that? And so it's good to take notes and maybe write a journal if we can. But on this list of personal information, if we can begin to fill in the spaces, maybe use what was put up on the screen as a reference and just write out the things like churches or organizations that I belong to, clubs, associations, ministries. Just start writing notes. And these are some headings that you can put them under, like biographical information, my story. You may want to start stories from when you were a kid and then go into others, kind of divide it up. In social work, there was a term called partializing. And I think that's really helped me with organizing in my life, because you kind of like break it down and write stories. And you know what? They don't have to be in an exact order. You can reorder them at any time. Just take notes, have a tablet, and just start writing notes about your life story. Anything that you'd like to share with other people.
Beverly, you asked that question, and one of the things that about a year ago, I ordered something off of Amazon, and the title of it is really what kind of got me. It was, "What do I want people to know after I'm dead?" And I thought that's cuts through it. It just names it for what it is, and sometimes maybe that's where we need to start. I mean, we want people to know the stuff that's warm and fuzzy, but they also need to know, you know, where's the passwords,
Yes.
where's the safety deposit box, all of that stuff. So I think, starting with the practical, what do I want and what do I need people to know so that I can put my life in order, not so much even for me, but for them.
Well, I think if you take a look at this list of personal information, if you complete this, you'll cover the territory. And it's not like you have to complete all of it at one time. If you take a look at it, it's pretty comprehensive. And over the years, many lists were put together, and I added things that were not on any of those lists. And so to use it as a guide, you may want to stretch it out like more of an outline, and maybe have headings under social involvements, identifications. But I think pretty much if you were to take a look at these points in the personal information section, then you'll cover the territory in terms of giving your advocate some direction. I know a guy whose brother died 2 years ago, and he went to St. Louis. He wasn't close to his brother, and there was no password for anything. And you end up having to get a court order. And just yesterday, a friend of mine said that a former secretary of hers was at University Hospital in serious condition and could not respond. And in the records, they saw my friend's phone number. So they called her and found out that the daughter was in Mexico, not close to the person in the hospital. And because my friend couldn't give the date of birth, they wouldn't share any information with her.
I think thank you, Arthur. I think another thing I would say about gathering information, I think we all need teachable moments. And a couple of years ago, when I was home for a class reunion, my brothers and sister, we were in an antique store. Well, that's a good place to go and start talking about, I remember when this was, not an antique. And we had some laughter, and all of a sudden, I realized we were at a place where we could talk about stuff that we hadn't talked about before. So I think timing is important.
Yes.
I think connecting with people at a time when they're ready to talk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just handing somebody something to fill out can be overwhelming. We have to pull the story out of them a little bit.
This is about feelings and about relationships, exactly as you're saying. But it's also I don't know if we were to take a poll now, how many people have organized their information. But I was involved with many people at end of life and friends too. And almost everybody I know says, I'm working on it. And you see, there is a sense of urgency, because for many times the information was delivered. Well, so-and-so is terminal, but 2 weeks ago he was walking around and whistling Dixies. So I mean, it is important to take a look at this. But what you said, doing it with someone else can make a big difference, a confidant, and maybe your advocate.
I think another thing that strikes me is that this is a continuous story. Mm-hmm. And I think the question also, Beverly, about what is a consult is so important, because as you know, at ABODE, people are finishing their story. And so there are times when that story has to be told at that very moment. So, and in terms of a consult, from my perspective, is when we invite people in to process something that's really challenging and difficult. And so I think a consult can be very formal, but it also can be an informal conversation. But I think when we're with people at that time in their life journey, I think we're helping to finish that story or complete that story. So, I'm not Mary or Edwin even maybe would want to be able to address more what the consult is. I know what it was when in hospice. Mary, is there a consult that you have now? Is there a formal consult, ethics consult?
Mostly when we welcome the guests to Abode, and we work so closely with the hospice team. So Beverly could probably weigh in on that too, of having those types of discussions.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to say is that I highly suggest that that maybe some discussions with one's physician or a lawyer or a financial planner may be in order. Consider these as resources because they can also kind of help, and they really should have this information as well. And I think Darwin can speak, as others, to the importance of funeral planning. And so Porter Loring has an excellent book that has guidelines for wishes that a person might want to have. And so it's just excellent in terms of looking at things the way I'd like to plan these things.
Hearing about resources sometimes reminds me of, I look in my own home and I look at all the books that I have and I think, golly, all the resources that are around me, but sometimes I'm not even aware of what's so close to me, and yet it's right there.
That's
and
right.
I think sometimes in the work that we do, just to remind people that there are resources available to them. And sometimes the resource might be in the form of a person, other times it might be in the form of written material. And as Arthur was saying, I think giving people both of our voice and our heart, but also written material can be valuable. And I think the website that you have has a lot of that on it right now. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to put the things that Arthur's been talking about, especially the checklist, because I found the checklist to be really helpful. I've got several siblings that are really struggling with health right now. And there were a couple things on that checklist that I thought, golly sakes, I need to pay attention to that. So are there any other chat? Somebody else said, oh, even on our phones. Oh yeah, there's lots of information. Just lose your phone one day and you've lost a lot of information. And you're absolutely right.
Well, I have a friend who works in a law office, and his boss provides lunch every day. And the son of the boss said, I'm going to get Italian. So would y'all like that? They said, yeah. But my friend said, please separate the pasta, the tomato sauce from the pasta. And the guy said, the son said, okay. He went and got the Italian, brought it back, and the pasta was mixed with the tomato sauce. Now, my friend is allergic to tomato sauce, so he couldn't eat it. And so if we cannot respond, it could very well be that there's, in fact, the little things become big things when we can't respond. So this is an opportunity just to take a look at this list, whether we do it or not. It may be a matter of making friends with it, starting small, just writing notes and sharing them with people that we trust.
By the way, I uploaded the list in the chat. So if everyone has access to the chat, you can download the list there. And I'll also email it out tomorrow to everyone.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you.
This is Beverly. I have a question about the book. What do I want people to know after I'm dead? What was something interesting you found in the book that you went, I would never thought of that? Was there something?
Well, it was a lot of the practical things, but there was also some things. Are there relationships that maybe your family don't know about that you want them to know? Are there people that they may not be connected with? I mean, it was very practical things that related not only to life and death issues, but also practical things that you just felt like somebody ought to know. Passwords was obviously one of them, but also just pertinent information, especially for those of us that live away from our families. But it's really was I'm still filling it out, and I gave it to to several friends, and I think we've realized that some of it was just what you would have expected, credit card numbers and all that stuff that you would have expected to be all in one place. But it was really, I think for me, it was having all of that information in one place instead of my family having to go through the computer and, to find everything. So I think in some ways it was like we live in such a computer age that we've really cut ourselves off on some levels from having it all in one space. So that's kind of what I sense from it. It's available on Amazon. It's just
I have another question about death certificates. That's something that we really don't talk a lot about with our families, our patients. But since both of you worked hospice on that end, what was would be your advice to people about getting death certificates? Where, how many? What are they going to be used for?
I think I've heard the number 15, maybe 15 to 20. You just never know when you're going to need another one. You can be used for access, for canceling subscriptions, for credit card verification, for insurance policies.
I think in working with the funeral home, what I have come to appreciate is basically more is better than less, because you never know when you're going to need them. And
what do you need them for? What
do you need them for? Well, I think legally is probably one of the biggest things that you need them if you're going to close an account, or you're going to share with people that information that you need. So I think a lot of it is legal. Anything else, Arthur, that comes to mind that they need it for?
Well, the insurance policy for sure. Bank accounts, any access really, any financial access. It just would make it easier.
I think some people in the very beginning find that such an emotional charged element, and it's like a death certificate. I'm going to get 20 death certificates. I'm going to say 20 times over that my brother died. I think there's that emotional energy that goes with that. And so I think when we work with people, it's important to recognize that. And so when we tell people you need 20 death certificates, that's a little bit different than telling people you need 20 birth certificates. The emotional energy that's tied to it. But that's a good question, but an important one, I think, at the time of death to process. And also, there's different rules and different regulations in different states, especially when it relates to cremation and those kinds of things. So I think, again, depending upon the situation, depending upon the state, I think it's always good to ask wherever you are what the recommendation is from that particular funeral home.
There's a question I used to ask families, because in hospice, when you're referred to a family and you go to the door, you never know what's on the other side of the door. You just never know who you're going to meet. It's just an adventure in a way. But it was kind of morbid in a way. I mean, advanced directives, and kept alive by artificial means. And so it's kind of rough. I would always ask the question, what did this person enjoy most in life? And I'd like to share a couple stories. One of them, that they said, well, she was a taxidermist. And I looked at her and at them, and I said, what? And they said, well, she was a taxidermist. And they said, go in that room next door. Go through that door. And it was a room full of stuffed animals. I had no clue. And that was her passion. And then another one, the lady was sitting right there across from me with her husband. And let me see, he was dying. Yeah. And I asked him, what did you enjoy most in life? And they all looked above the TV at a picture of a boat. And I said, oh my God, what's going on here? And they said, well, that was his boat. And I said, well, tell me about that. And they said, well, he used to work over by Walsham Road, and he'd pass a school over there, or let's say some warehouse or something that had a chain link fence, and it had a huge boat sitting there in the yard. And he always would talk about the boat. Oh, that's a great boat. I'd like to have that boat. And they all said, well, do it. Well, he looked into it and he bought the boat, and he took it to his house in the back, and the whole family helped him paint it every year and tar it or whatever they do to boats. Anyway, so they helped him with that, and they went out and used the boat. And get a load of this. Behind that was a railroad. And I don't know how this came about, but they said on the day that the boat was finished and dedicated, the newspaper was there and the train stopped. And then they told me that the boat was named after his wife.
There's always more to the story, isn't there?
Yes, and beautiful things to bring out the joys in people's lives. I think
Arthur, we have another question I'd like us to respond to. Mary's asking, does anyone have suggestions on what to do with our social media? Should we clear it all out as we head into our home stretch, or leave it as is?
I'm going to ask the knowledge of the community to respond to that one.
Anybody have a response to that?
Mine's just a guess. I would assume, just, and I've got to write this down, but, I would just leave somebody in charge of it to take it down, to close it, or to tell my story for a bit of time so people know that I've passed and what's going to happen next. And then, after that, close it.
It's so interesting because I had a situation in our church where there was a man whose Facebook just stayed up and nothing was changed. And it caused so much frustration and anger for a couple of the people in the congregation that they found out who his loved ones were. And they started, you got to take that down. You got to take down. That's so upsetting. And I found that so interesting that they were so upset with it. But I think that points out how important it is to have somebody, like you say, Beverly, that might be able to take care of it. Because if it's not taken down, then it's still there. So I'm not a big social media person myself, so I'm not the person that would have the answer to that. Anybody else? Anybody else?
I think a lawyer would probably best address that in terms of liability and risk management, because that's a serious question. There was a social worker in Oregon that was very, very highly respected and retired. And he had a box in his attic of some patient records, and they were taped shut and everything. And one time family members cleared the attic. And this was while he was still living. And it went to a dump, and the information was opened and went to the newspaper, and that person was sued. So there's something to be said about things we want to be kept private.
I had a friend that passed, and her Facebook birth date keeps popping up, and it, not that it's upsetting, but it's like, gee, she's been gone like a couple of years already, and it makes you wonder who is monitoring, or what family. Maybe they want to keep it up there. I'm not sure. Just as a remembrance.
I think in the chat, people are putting things like, Michelle, digital legacy. You need to let people know if you want it left up or taken down. And Yanira mentioned a digital proxy would need to know everything about your access codes and network community. And, and kind of along those lines, we see a lot of this caring bridge. When someone is seriously ill, you can open up a page, a social media account that kind of, is a chronicle of their illness and how they're doing, so that, there aren't 40 phone calls a day. You can just go to their Caring Bridge account and see what happened today. And yeah.
Yeah, I know of two instances
real things to-
where people, when people died and other people in going through their belongings at the estate sale found very personal letters.
Somebody,
Lesson.
Michelle, to everyone, your executor is in charge of your assets. They need to know how to deal with this. That's a good point. Yes.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yes.
You know, as I guess I just want to ask this question, and it's not one that we need a show of hands on, but as I'm here tonight, as I'm thinking about what we're presenting and what I heard Arthur talk about and what I've heard you ask about, do you feel that you have enough information um, to leave the kind of information you want your loved ones to have? Because that's our goal tonight, that you would get information that would help you to organize your end of life care. And as Arthur and I worked on putting this together, I was so aware that we had limited time, and yet there's so many resources. So that's one of the reasons that we put a lot of stuff online. So we hope that you'll go online and look at what's there. And if there's more that you need, let us know that, because that was the intent of our workshop objective. It's giving you information on how to do some of this.
You may want to space out the information that's listed because it's a little concentrated online. And I suggested we space it out. It's less threatening when it's spaced out. And but as concentrated, it can really seem like something really tough to swallow. And just little by little, putting information can be helpful.
Well, we're almost out of time, but I thank you both for your information. And boy, this sure taught me I've got a lot of work to do. You know, I've got a will and all of those things, but I don't have specific instructions for my people. And that's one thing that we're, you know, what did I say the other night? Something about it was a quote that, you know, something that's astonishing. You know, I see people die every day, but for some reason we just don't think we're going to die.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's time to get our stuff in order so that if something does happen, you know, my loved ones know what to do.
Yeah.
So I appreciate all of this. Thank you.
If we can do it in a spirit of appreciation and celebration for our lives, appreciating the times and the relationships and the events, I think that'll help us put into a spirit of a journeying. And maybe writing in the details won't be the focus, but the appreciation, and maybe some of the stories of our lives to be shared will be.
I think I guess what I'm hearing you say, Arthur, is instead of it looking at it as like something I have to do, is it something I want to do?
Yes.
That's going to empower those that I care about.
Well, and if this workshop is more of like a party, I think a party is a lot more fun than a text.
Okay, I'm going to make a party.
Yeah.
Well, talking about parties, next week on the 4th is our 4th installment of ABODE Academy 2. And it's called A Good Death, the After Party. And we're going to be joined by Pat Sullivan from the Neptune Society and also from Dr. Danny Westcott from the Body Farm at Texas State. So some alternatives to traditional burial. And so I hope you can all join us. Don't forget that in the morning, you'll see a survey come across on your email feed. Please give us some feedback on tonight. If there's something we didn't cover, something that really stuck with you that you enjoyed, we'd love to hear that too. And also just further topics you'd like to hear about ABODE Academy. So that concludes tonight's session. I thank you all for joining us, and thank you so much for sharing with us tonight.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's what ABODE is about, is celebrating our lives and living it abundantly.
Exactly. Okay. So
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Darwin.
Peace.